This week, we are talking about Exorcist, Believer, and now your host, me. What is up, everybody? Welcome to K&M Geekly. Just a sneak peek at two geeks talking about some of the things getting them through their weeks, and I'm Mike Indiglio, as usual. But you'll notice, over in the Keith box, that is not, it turns out, Keith Varney. In fact, in the magic of post-production, I'll have it say Nick. Or something. Wow. Yeah. I have to remember to do that. My brother and I, Nick, who's joined us before, guest of the show, friend of the show, we checked out some stuff we wanted to talk about, and I thought I would put a Geekly in the can, as they say, to give Keith some time off for his new musical that he's feverishly working on edits to, I'm sure, at this very moment. Nick, how's your week been so far? Welcome to Sunday.
I'm always excited for Keith, even when he's not doing creative things.
Yeah, that's true. We wish Keith is doing great. He's not sick. He's just not on the show today because he and I recorded yesterday, and he gets sick of me, it turns out. You'll notice our background here. It is Red October here in Philadelphia. The Philadelphia Phillies, who kind of like, just kind of, baseball just is during the season, and there's ups and downs. Baseball, Nick, is a marathon, not a sprint, but we are in the championship season now. Really exciting. That's why I'm a little tired vocally, because I was screaming and shouting last night. But additionally, speaking of world records, and this is kind of apropos to Geekly, you have some breaking news when it comes to marathons yourself.
Breaking news. Yeah, the Chicago Marathon this morning. There was both a world record and a course record broken in the men's marathon. The world record was broken by over 34 seconds, which is shocking considering people never thought the previous world record would fall. And there's a new Kenyan in town pushing the pace. So it was pretty impressive. So excellent conditions for that race today. And now they're ever so much closer to a legitimate breaking of the 2-hour marathon. Interestingly, though, and you can just Google Chicago Marathon results for any of our geeks out there who are runners, the race started off a little bit slow. So about 4 or 5 miles into the race, they threw in a 5K, which is 3.1 miles, at 15 minutes and 30 seconds. So anyone who's ever run a 5K, that's how fast they went through in a 26-mile race about 5 miles into the race.
Jesus.
Then, interestingly, around mile 13 and then around mile 18, some of the pacers, the people who helped set the pace for the race, dropped out. So the eventual winner just went on ahead and dropped a 4:21 mile just to kind of like establish his pace a little bit. So he actually wound up running negative splits in this race. His second split was under 60 minutes for the second half of the race, which is just mind-boggling in so many ways.
And
so pretty impressive stuff.
No asterisks on this, like a wind assist or anything like that. I know that.
They have to look at all of the results and things like that. So it's considered unofficial until they verify it. But I don't see anything that's going to cause anything that would disqualify the world record.
Wow. Well, congratulations to. Do you have the Kenyan's name by any chance?
Once we went live, I lost my whole feed. Oh. So everyone's thinking Kipchoge because he's the former world record holder, and he did the project in Italy where they had him on a race course and did all the wind assist to get him under 2 hours. Mm-hmm. But it's not. It's the new guy, and I think it's only his third competitive marathon. So pretty impressive stuff there.
Kelvin Kiptum.
There it is.
Kelvin Kiptum in a stunning debut with possible world record. I guess because it's unofficial until the. Wow.
Still verified.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, 2 hours and 35 seconds.
It's ridiculous.
That's faster than I can run a half. No, I've run a little bit faster of a half marathon, but by not much.
Yeah, and running a half marathon under 60 minutes on its own is an impressive feat, much less doing it in the second half of a marathon. So
that's insane.
Yeah, there's some crazy times are upon us in the world of running, which is exciting. And there's also, I'm not sure if it was a course record in the women's race, but it was a pretty spectacular women's race too, from what I understand.
What do you think you'll get with your new bionic? I was telling the fans, I don't know if I said it on the live feed or if I just was telling Keith, but they were about your new hips. And you think that's gonna, Nick's getting some bionic hips. It turns out he was actually, I guess, born with messed up hips, and you kind of just lived your life without knowing.
Pretty much, yeah. Like I always just assumed the pain that I had in my lower back was from running, then from cheerleading and gymnastics and mascotting, and then obviously from pro wrestling. But it turns out all those things did was make the degeneration happen faster. So hip dysplasia. And it's, in addition to that, because you can't just have one thing, the ball and the sockets in my hips never really fit properly, it turns out. So met with the surgeon on Friday, and hip surgery replacement is scheduled for October 27th. My surgeon, Dr. Pavlidis, is a slightly shorter version of Brock Lesnar. He's a little bit shorter and a little bit darker, but he is a gigantic man. And he set me straight on things I can do and not do after surgery, Mike. So running is pretty much done now. There's no more running.
How do you feel about that? Is there like a mourning process taking place, or you're like, no, I wasn't going to run anyway? Walking is really my focus currently.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually, honestly, there probably could be a mourning process later. I am in so much pain.
Yeah,
I would give anything to just have the pain be gone at this point.
That's crazy.
The slightly more depressing piece, and I know this sounds ridiculous because, running is really something that is like a lifelong thing, and I don't really wrestle anymore anyway. But the surgeon's also a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu MMA guy.
Mm-hmm.
He understands pro wrestlers, and he goes, no more charity matches, no more fundraisers. There's nothing. You're done. You don't get back into the ring again ever. So that was actually a little more depressing. However, the interesting thing he did say, and I don't want to get too philosophical on a Geekly podcast, obviously, but you look back at life and you wonder the what ifs, and we've talked about that a million times. What if we had, I'd gone in a different direction and professional wrestling had been my full-time, career. Doing that full time probably would have really degenerated the situation much, much, much faster.
Mm-hmm.
So my in-ring career likely would have ended pretty shortly anyway. You know what I mean? So
that's assuming you didn't break your neck or
your
back.
Assuming
prior
right,
to that.
Yeah, you assume you assume nothing else, just this genetic condition, as it turns out. So that actually kind of made me feel a little bit better about some of my life choices.
Yeah, and not only that, but your life choices made it happen later, right? And you mentioned this to me at dinner the other night, and it actually is really interesting, especially with the. Well, I'll give it a geek spin. Is every day technology is advancing by leaps and bounds. So every day that you didn't have to have the surgery got better, right?
Yes.
So you're getting it at probably maybe not, I guess probably a couple years from now it'll be even better, but it's at a pretty good place. I can't believe when you showed me kind of the pictures and the drilling and all the stuff that makes you queasy, the fact that they're going to have you on your feet that day, like greasing the wheel, so to speak, is pretty crazy to me.
Yeah, the recovery time it's just unbelievable how fast you recover and how quickly you start your PT and everything for the hip. So anyone who's going through that kind of pain and just keeps putting it off, don't. You know what I mean? Like it's
I see ways
to
I see it as relief. A best case scenario for you because you and I, my brother and I, we talk about this on the podcast all the time. Keith's the same way. We're sort of don't do it. You have to overdo it, right? You don't make a small plan. You make a giant plan. I won't do just like a small little podcast. We got to blow it out to a full like broadcast production. And there are lots of positives to that and a ton of negatives as well. And Nick and I plan these giant workout cycles, or we a marathon in Malibu, like crazy giant things, and life intervenes, and sometimes they don't follow through, and all that adds to the little voice in your head that's like, this is just another thing you didn't do, blah blah blah. This is like a clean, fresh restart forced upon you physically, where you're going to start from PT. Like, okay, I mean, we're talking basics, 1 foot ahead of the other, like put your left foot in front of your right foot, move that way. That's where you're going to be starting from. But that's awesome, right? Talk about you get to start small and you can set more bite-sized goals. And like you've already lost like a ton of weight. You're like in a great spot. You're putting yourself in a great condition. I think it's a net win. I mean, aside from the fact that you're going to have like metal in your pelvis, but Yeah,
I mean, it's metal, titanium, and ceramic. I think the big thing I ask
money for that. I mean, the new iPhone 15 is titanium. We could stick one of those up there.
Every time I see that commercial, I'm thinking that will be the intro to the surgery. Like they wheel me in and there's a giant IMAX screen
titanium.
And you see the the surgeon, Dr. Pavlidis, super nice. Like he answered all my questions, but like I said, he's kind of intimidating. So I stopped short of asking the question I wanted to ask, which was, could he put the RoboCop gun thing in my hip?
Mm-hmm.
Because imagine that, like the hip pops out and then you could pull just your phone, for not a gun.
Yeah,
I
you
don't
don't
need a
need a
gun,
gun.
but
No.
like pull out my phone. That would be pretty
That
cool.
would be
But
cool. So what are we talking?
yeah.
Crutches? How long do you think you'll be out of work?
So the plan is 2 weeks out of work. You're not supposed. So here, and this is the thing. There's different recommendations for how people heal differently. He's expecting that I'm going to heal very quickly. So it's really 6 weeks until you can drive again. So I have a plan to kind of go in with Danielle and maybe with John a few times after the 2 week initial part's over. But it's really the first week that's the most important because you're kind of on the narcotics as you're recovering just from the surgical part. After that, you're doing the PT, you're increasing your strength, the muscles and the ligaments around all that area that you're trying to strengthen up. And then from there, the key is that the bone has to grow into the new joint.
Mm.
That takes up to 6 months. So as you're increasing your workload, you know what I mean? Like the more you walk, starting to exercise again and things like that, you have to be very conscious of not dislocating the new hip and to allow the bone enough time to kind of grow into the hip. So
That
you
makes
gotta,
sense.
yeah, nutritionally, you gotta eat smart. You just can't overdo it. The things you were just talking about is really kind of, all of that is important. And for people like us who tend to go too big, too hard sometimes,
Yeah.
it's going to force a slower pace. But what's nice is, I don't know if you mentioned it on the show, Mike and I started working out again. And we joined a gym. We just decided it was going to be easier given where Mike lives. I work near where Mike lives. It's a little further to come up my way. So it's not always convenient to work out here. And we started with getting a routine going and nice and slow. And this is kind of slowing that down and derailing it. But at the same time, while that's true, Mike's still been able to work out. I've still been losing weight. So I think we're really kind of going to be in a good spot to really amp things up by spring in a positive way. Amping up meaning being healthy, not necessarily, running an Ironman or doing something crazy.
Yeah, I'm trying to get through this cruise thing coming up just to knock that off my list so that I can kind of relax into just normal again. And yeah, anyway, so that all said, one of our last things, because I'm going away in a couple weeks, one of our last kind of big outings we've had recently was we went to see, we were really psyched. I think I'd mentioned it months ago on the podcast. Saw the new trailer for Exorcist Believer and was just fired up because I love a good scary trailer. And Nick and I had just seen, I talked about it on the podcast. I raved about Talk to Me, one of my top movies of the year so far. Forget genre, just one of my top movies of the year. And so we were really fired up to see Exorcist. It's spooky season. What a better time to go. We went this past week with our two nieces, my two nieces, Nick's daughters, Talia Bella, 14, 15. It was funny, I was saying, because, in fact, I have a great screenshot for this. Let's I was psyched to. I was texting Nick. It's hard to forget that they're grown up people now, and I was like, oh, "Are we going to scar them?" Because Nick showed me The Exorcist 1, the original, way too early in my life, and it scared the hell out of me. So I was like, "Should we even take them?" But well, he's like, "They'll be fine." And the best, well, I'll get to that. Their reaction to the film was actually one of my favorite parts. But we should mention. David Gordon Green is the director of the film. Peter Slatter, David Gordon Green joined up for the screenplay. Original story by Scott Teems. Danny McBride, who's give him a screenwriting credit anywhere. I love Danny McBride and David Gordon Green. And of course, it's based on the characters William Peter Blatty, and I think starring effectively Leslie Odom Jr., Ann Dowd, Jennifer Nettles, Norbert Leo Butz, and some other folks. Well, this is going to be riddled with spoilers.
Yes. You might as well say it now because there's no way to review it without spoilers, which is fine.
Let me tell you, it's okay. I think in many ways, we're going to save you from having to watch this film. It's not a high recommend from me. It's a fun watch, and I think even knowing the context of the film, you'd be fine. If you're an Exorcist fan, you should absolutely see it. If you're just a horror fan, you check it out when you can on streaming. I wouldn't pay the money in the theaters, and there's gonna be a lot of other scary movies this summer or this spooky season that are worth your cash.
Yes.
But that all said, we saw the movie, Nick. Right before we had seen the movie, I laid out all the reviews to Nick and said how trashy I'd read that it was. But that doesn't mean it couldn't surprise us. So let me go to you first, my resident Exorcist expert. You've seen the television show, all of the films. I know the first film and kind of snippets of memories of the other film. So what was your feeling on the Believer?
So first of all, you got to give them mad props for the trailer to Believer.
Right. Yeah.
You always have to worry when they hold the review embargoes until the day before the film releases. That usually tells you something. But with horror movies, the reviews don't usually matter. You know what I mean? It's more word of mouth. People are more forgiving in those situations. However, I mean, even I have to admit the reviews were pretty terrible.
It currently sits at a 21 on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, and that's the curse of every Exorcist movie since the first one. The first one wasn't critically received wonderfully initially, as word of mouth picked up, and then all of a sudden people started paying attention to the performances. Then things got serious for the original Exorcist. That's a whole other story. I would say that going into the movie, I was hoping that it really played into the opening element of the trailer, which is that these two girls mysteriously disappear for 3 days. And then where were they? What happened? And now all of a sudden, signs of possession. So what story is that going to be? I think this movie, for me, was really kind of split into two parts. There is everything leading up until with the reintroduction of Christine McNeil, the mother of Reagan from the original movie, and everything that happened after that. Lots of great ideas. However, it did not deliver in the second half of the movie. So if I'm rating this movie right off the top, and I have a lot of stuff to talk about with the movie, I would say that the first half was fun and atmospheric and made me think a lot, because as a fan of the original movies, you at least know that David Gordon Green had said it. You're really following the premise of the first movie. And, you maybe 2 and 3 play in, maybe they don't. And obviously the TV show can't play in based on what they do in the movie here. Same with the prequels. And then there's the second half of the movie, which is where things really, really go off the rails. And that's where a lot of our conversation was, Mike. And even the girls at 14 and 15, never having seen the original Exorcist, brought up a lot of good points. So in a quick interpretation, the original Exorcist, they never even say the name of the demon. It's mentioned in the book, and then he's shown several times in statues, and you're able to figure out geographically who the demon in the original Exorcist is. That demon is Pazuzu. He's the demon who brings famine and things like that. However, there's different interpretations of that god. And then he becomes also the main part of Exorcist 2, and then that everything kind of moves on from there. You didn't need to know the name of the demon in the original Exorcist, because it was more about Father Karras, more about the relationship between the mom and the daughter, Reagan, and your overall interpretation of, man, like, is evil able to triumph? And is it in the absence of God? And is it in the face of God? How does that all play together? And the movie is able to do that. It's able to psychologically mess with you the entire time, with the music, with the special effects, with the gore, with the obscenity, all of it. And then they're also able to, at the very, very end of the original, give you hope somehow in a scene that's less than 30 seconds long. That's a great movie right there, to me. That's a great movie. This movie did none of that in the second half of the film. It introduces an interesting concept in the beginning. I was very interested in the dual possession idea. And then all of it fell flat. Now, when we talked about it at dinner afterwards at the Poorhouse in Exton, great restaurant, I was a little more forgiving, but I've done research since I've gotten home, and I've actually watched a few more movies, one of which was The Pope's Exorcist, which came out in the spring. And I went back and I revisited the first season of the Exorcist TV show. And it kind of didn't make me angry, obviously, but it disappointed me, because it turns out that that dual possession theme wasn't as novel as I thought it was, and it's been done better in other movies and other ideas over the past 10 or 15 years, let's say. So I guess I just don't understand how, Universal can put $400 million into kind of obtaining the rights to this new trilogy. And then David Gordon Green, who just made a trilogy of Halloween movies, makes some mistakes, I think, here that I don't think are forgivable. In fact, I would actually be disappointed if this goes forward into a sequel, because I don't care. This story doesn't matter to me now. They didn't do anything to make me care. So that's my initial overview of the initial movie.
Yeah, I share a lot of that. I will say, let me start in with a couple of the research I did. I was much harsher to judges. I might have flipped the other way a little bit, in that my understanding was that they had spent $400 million on this movie, and that is not accurate. The $400 million was actually a deal worked out with Universal Pictures and Peacock to acquire just the rights to IP. And the general idea was a trilogy of films and potentially some sort of extended universe living on Paramount Plus. Or not Paramount, excuse me. Yes, Peacock. Peacock.
Okay.
Which, the way people are just throwing money around and making decisions in the streaming sphere right now, and the I've got a channel, you've got a channel, we've got a channel, you've got a channel, with Disney Plus, with everybody and their original content on their original apps, it makes sense to get some big budget type IP over on your side. I get that. The $400 million in the grand scheme of the streaming wars, okay. The production budget on this film was $30 million.
I did see that,
Tracking
yes.
to far exceed that in its opening weekend to critical panning. So, okay, you get your money. The Blumhouse Pictures productions or whatnot, and your Gordon Green, they know how to spin a cheap movie. Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
And make the money. So the sequel, Nick, has already been greenlit in production, release already currently scheduled for April 18th, 2025, with the very creative title. This is Exorcist Believer, and that one's called Exorcist Deceiver. So I can't say any new good ideas have shown themselves just yet.
No, and they did use Deceiver probably 8 to 9 times in the final exorcism scene to set up this sequel idea here. And one of the things you said, Mike, and if you want to elaborate on that, I guess now's as good a time as any. You had mentioned like they dropped potential ideas in the buckloads for where maybe they could go in the next film, but never committed to any single idea, which left this movie feeling very incomplete and too vague and too nebulous.
Yeah, well, I'll say, here are the positives I'll give you on the film. I think the performances across the board are inspired, especially from our three of our principals, 2 of which are musical theater stars. So, but not widely known. I think Leslie Odom Jr. was a breakout star in Hamilton, but you've seen him in a lot of nationwide commercials and different things. His star's on the rise. Norbert Leo Butz has been a journeyman in the theater world. He plays one of the 2 girls' fathers. So Leslie Odom Jr. and Norbert Leo Butz are the 2 fathers who are diametrically opposed in sort of very culturally trite ways, right? Religion, not religious, single parent, wholesome family value stand-in, yada yada. But the performances are good. One character is a little more fleshed out than the other one, but that's not any fault of their own. Everybody is very inspired. The 2 girls are very inspired in what I'm sure is a very difficult performance to give. They're very good. Ann Dowd, who is great in this film, a great use of Ann Dowd, because generally she's sort of the kind of creepy harbinger type character who also then turns out to be evil. But in this film, they don't go that way. They let her fill out her potential as a protagonist, and I think it's a nice swerve, and it's a nice opportunity for her. That doesn't mean she's not still kind of creepy. She is, but she's great in this film, and so everybody's really, really great. The other thing I appreciated was that the film ends. Period. End of film. There's no true, here's the next sequel, here's the thing, or giant cliffhanger, which many big budget movies have done this summer, of just like, the movie's over now. The second half of it is in a year. Deal with it. Spider-Man did that, which I loved. Mission Impossible cliffhanger, so it didn't do that, which I think is to the credit of the audience. At least you get to walk out and say, you know what, I hated that, I'm never watching it, but it's over. And they didn't goad you into a second film. So those are the things I appreciated. I also thought it looked pretty good. And
yes, I do agree. It did look good.
Some of the scares were creepy. I would say I agree with you. The first 25 minutes, there's some great stuff. It's a great setup. They get the right haunty elements, which made the the first Exorcist film is not a gory jump scare movie for the most part. It is a psychological thriller. And a lot of that is unshown and unknown. The idea of religion is creepy. Old religion, the ancient demon, all that stuff is very creepy. The crisis of faith, it had a lot of meta, I won't even say political, meta philosophical horror and all kinds of stuff. This film
Yes.
isn't interested in any of that. That is
Nope.
all trappings to what is a pretty paint by numbers jump scare horror film, really. And there's only a couple of jump scares. The problem here is that they don't deal anything with the religion. They don't give you a true reason why the girls are possessed. They don't explain how they were possessed, which is what Nick mentioned, the most interesting question. They disappear for 3 days, right? And the best you get is like an offhanded Bible reference to Jesus being dead for 3 days before he rose again and he goes to hell, and you're like, oh, is that the answer? This movie sets up ideas, like Nick said, by the buttload, right? Like just by images or a mention of some sort of ancient thing here, or an altar there, or oh, my wife was blessed by a voodoo woman here, and like all these ideas that you in your brain as good genre film watchers are putting your murder board together, right? You've got this
Yep.
sticky note with your red rope going over here, and you're putting it all together because, like the best of films, this is a weird pull, but Memento, right? Memento is just ideas and shards of things, and it's the very end, or Usual Suspects. At the very end, you're like, oh my God, it's all becoming clear. This is what's happening. That's not happening here. Okay, if that's not going to happen, at least we're going to find out, well, here's the rules. They're setting it up. Here's how we kill the monster because they've set these rules up, and now we have to like gather our crew together, which is what this film does. It gathers this guy. It gets this guy on board with that guy. The parents are now together. We've got an old priest, a young priest, and Dowd. We've got medicine. We've got it all together. Now we can accomplish the exorcism. But then it comes down to sort of a binary random choice that is supposed to sort of pull from the story of Solomon and the two sons and a vagary, and then the ending is not completely satisfying because one family wins and the other family loses, or maybe it's a deal they're making with the demon. It doesn't commit, is what Nick said in short. It doesn't commit, and because of that, you're left going, wait, what? It's very cotton candy, Nick. Cotton candy looks great, it smells great, and then you eat it, and you're like, oh, I didn't eat anything. It was air, and I'm not satisfied.
Yeah, and part of what it actually feels like when you're watching it, knowing that there is a plan for a sequel, and this is launching of a new trilogy or whatever TV trilogy, however that's going to play out. You know that they can cheat, and that's what disappoints me because. Yeah. They didn't make decisions apparently, or they had ideas for different decisions to make based on how the audience responds or based how the box office plays out and things like that. And to me, that's rewriting. That's cheap. Mm-hmm. It's, cheap heat, in the wrestling world, as they would say. Whereas in movies like The Conjuring, and the first two Conjuring movies, it's clear that was fleshed out from the start. That whole mythology, the rules, the way these characters, the backstories, and then the backstories that came after that, the Conjuring spinoffs, clearly that was all storyboarded long ago because it never really deviates from what they set out to do. And those are cheap movies too, you know what I mean? That were meant to just like entertain around time of Halloween, but you've got to respect what they did from a character and a mythology perspective. I'll give you another quick example of that. Say what you will about the American Horror Story seasons progressing.
We just talked about the crap one. This new one's
terrible. Oh, did you?
But go ahead.
Interesting. Well, American Horror Story in 8 seasons now or 9 seasons
12 seasons.
Oh, really? Yeah. They're 12 seasons in?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
There's a lot of bad ones,
but they've never deviated from the rules. Mm-hmm. The rules always stand, and they always kind of let you know that halfway through each season, you're also going to get some type of story beat change. You know what I mean? So you kind of know at some point what's coming. And I respect the fact that the rules are followed. This doesn't happen in this movie. And if nothing else, part of what you're supposed to get a feeling from The Exorcist is atmosphere, right? Which they gave us in the first half of the movie.
The first third, maybe.
The first third. Okay. Yeah. Until the possessions take hold, I would say. Fully. In the original Exorcist, in even The Exorcist 2, which I don't want to say it gets a bad rap, but let me come back to that. Then The Exorcist 3, which has tremendous atmosphere. And then even in the 2 prequel versions, they commit to the story, right? To the mythology. We got schlock in that second half. We got a kumbaya. We're all going to work together, and you're going to do your exorcism. I'm going to do my exorcism. We're all going to kind of play in together. Then they drop the what was supposed to be the big reveal. Like the thing you thought happened in the beginning turns out it didn't happen, and it's supposed to shake everyone's faith, and it doesn't. And that's something that should be explored in a future movie if they're going to do it, but we don't know if we're going to get anything like that. Just like the family that loses, that should be explored in the future movie too. You know what I mean? Like the sequel sets up a lot of trauma, or should set up a lot of trauma. But to me, it doesn't track, because you've just got this kumbaya, we're all going to do this together, even though we could kill 2 girls without having done hardly any research at all and trusting a woman who was an actress and wrote a book. And now when you get to the end of that, you're like, okay, well, this didn't play out so well. So where do we go from here?
I find your point is very salient, because, and I'll make it a little bit vague, but both fathers in this movie are presented with, one happened in the past, one happens in the present, with choices, right? Choices about who to save, let's say. But interestingly, and both times the reveal happens of who they choose or how the choice is made, you're supposed, like Nick said, it's supposed to be a mic drop moment. But the truth is that both choices are very reasonable in the moment.
Yep.
Right? What? Of course you want to save your daughter, or you want to save such, like, at neither time are you like, oh, mic drop. That's why this happened. It has no bearing on what the MacGuffin is. Speaking of MacGuffins, all the marketing. Look, you're looking at the picture. There must be a reason why 2 girls were possessed, right? There must be a reason, a link, a something. Turns out, as far as I can interpret, not really. It's just like a thing to do to make it like, so it's not just 1 girl, now it's 2 girls, and they both look creepy, and they both do creepy things. They're horrifically underserved. They say some funny things, and they do some like paranormal stuff, but ultimately it's about the drama happening around them. And you're like, oh, I want the girls to do scary stuff. Because when they're just being creepy before they go full Exorcist monster, that's the best part of the movie. The tension building and the stuff they're doing. And you want to know why. Once they become kind of it becomes kind of cartoonish when they are, because they're just like bolting them to chairs and wheeling them around and they're writhing. And you're like, well, okay. And you don't feel any of the, oh my God, what if this was happening in for real? And like, how would you deal with this? And I will say
you're right. That's a good point.
Now, what made it disappointing, so all of that said, whatever, it is what it's a horror movie, right? We go to dinner afterwards, and my 2 nieces we played a very fun game, basically like, well, if we had written the movie, what would we have changed? How could we have fixed the problems and made it make sense? And I gotta tell you, in a half an hour dinner, we wrote like 5 other better movies, and the girls had great ideas. But a couple that stuck with me, because I think it's directions they may go, because I think they planted some seeds, Nick, and tell me what you think. I think we might actually go to, because one of the girls is sort of unceremoniously not with us at the end of this film, and I think we might, just like the Conjuring films and in a What Dreams May Come, because they said about how Jesus had to go to hell, I think in film 2, we may learn that girl who makes it to the end of the film isn't actually with us as much as we think, and we have to go to the other place to get the girls back, much like they did in that 2nd or 3rd or 12th Conjuring movie. They had to, Patrick Wilson had to go and like get them from the Conjuring verse. I think that's where we might have to go in this film, and because they dropped enough of that.
Agreed. And you also, they could all again, there's ways to do that could become interesting. And I don't know that you could redeem the whole thing, but if that's what they do, because the one thing we've never done is gone into hell. You know what I mean? Like it's always taken place with the demons possessing in our world. You get a hint of that, a hint in Exorcist 3, and that was never the intention. But I guess what I would say is I don't have a lot of faith that they'll be able to pull that off effectively if that is what they do. Again, Exorcist 1, everything you said. In the Exorcist 3, which was more of like a thriller, almost more like a crime thriller, they hardly show any gore. All the big stuff happens off screen completely, and it's scarier for it. until you get to the end of the movie, and the studio wanted, an exorcism scene, so they had to kind of like, fake that in there. It didn't really work particularly well in Exorcist 2, which kind of did cross the spiritual plane a little bit or whatever, and definitely not in the prequels. However, where it did work, where I thought they really did a nice job, was the Exorcist TV show. And if they can kind of capture just the spirit of what the TV show tried to do, then maybe there's a chance, because the TV show established the rules based off the original movie. They established an imagery set that represented the demons, which made you be able to identify them too sometimes, but still not always as clearly as you would think. Which, you have to have some of that mystery, right? And had great character performances and kept surprising you and doing other things. So the first season of the TV show, which actually focuses on the original characters, played by different actors, sets up a bigger story. It sets up, higher stakes. It was good. That's what the next movie should do, or the next show should do. So you're right. I mean, if they go that route in the sequel, obviously the cameo that was at the very end of the movie, she would have to play a part somehow, because I'm sure she's still connected to that. You're always connected to the spiritual world somehow, I'm sure. And you're right. With the two girls from this movie, you might need the one girl to find
the other one. Yeah.
So, I mean, I hope they don't do it without like your Leslie Odom or whatever, because like he really did hold a lot of it together, I felt. But,
yeah,
it's the other thing I wanted to mention was I went because the other Exorcist movie that came out, not in the same series, in a different universe, was The Pope's Exorcist with Russell Crowe. And I think that came out like in the springtime or around there.
Yeah, it's on Netflix now, so you can watch it if you're interested. Or
yeah, I watched it 2 nights ago. And I found the fact that they did several of the things this movie tried to do interesting. I'm like, oh, okay, there's elements from this movie. But what The Pope's Exorcist did the entire time was it knew you were in on the joke, that it was a horror movie, and it was in on the joke the entire time. So whereas the movie itself wasn't scary, it was kind of funny and entertaining from a totally like popcorn schlock value. I can't believe Russell Crowe is doing this. But at the same time, I'm going to watch this entire movie. It was like part Indiana Jones, part, I guess the Mummy, I'll say more like the Brandon Fraser Mummy feel than it was.
It had an identity, which interestingly, from like you didn't think it was going to. In fact, it seemed like the complete void of that. But then watching it, you're like, oh, they have takes,
Yeah, and again,
I think it's a more a more enjoyable watch than The Exorcist, to be honest with you.
I found it entertaining, at least, because at least there was real humor baked into it, you know what I mean? And they did some stuff that, kind of makes you...
Well, there's a ton. Like, we had talked about this. The issue is that this genre, that it was so groundbreaking, right, when it came out. And then we've had so many good kind of takes at it. There was the Haunting of Emily Rose, or the Exorcism of Emily Rose, something like that. The Possession of Emily Rose, or something along those lines. And the Conjuring films, and there's been other possession and exorcist type movies. And so if you're going back to the well and saying, hey, we bought the rights, we're going back to the OG, you'd think they'd have more takes, and it just feels like 3 people wrote the screenplay to this, and there's a ton of ideas. I guarantee you we're going to get like a 4-hour director's cut that has... Because there are clearly threads that are just... I just don't believe that they're all red herrings, that they just they littered the entire movie with red herrings. There must be plot lines that just got cut, curtailed, or abandoned. And hopefully we get... I don't know if I'll watch it, but hopefully there's a cut that kind of explains that, because there's some baffling decisions in this film, almost enough to warrant watching, just to be like, what? Just to ask the questions yourself. So
yeah, almost like, why did you do that? Along those lines of other interesting, one of the things I think the Exorcism of Emily Rose did was that was set in a court situation. You know what I mean? Like, it was post, you knew she had died, and it was them looking back, and it was an investigation into it, which I thought was interesting. You know what I mean? Like, that was a different take. And then in 2011-ish, there was another movie that was like a found footage movie. They were allegedly, the story of the movie is this exorcist guy was about to retire, and they were going to film his last exorcism. and he has to go to this remote part of the South to do it. And the father of the girl who is possessed wants to kill the girl because he doesn't feel that she can be saved. And the Exorcist guy starts facing like, oh shoot, like this is real, and a lot of what he had done had been kind of theatrical in the past and stuff. So it was a very interesting. I'm not saying it worked per se, but it was kind of interesting. I think it might have been called Possession or something like that.
There's also another one, The Witch, which is a Robert an Eggers film that was like 2015, I think. I have it here. No, I'm lying. Yeah, 2015. And that was like it took place in the 1600s. And so it was kind
Huh.
of a possession film, witch kind of film, but it's happening to this girl in a different time period. So there's a lot of different takes you can make. Anyway, overall, I would say we're very lukewarm on it. But there's it. I don't think it was it's a 23 Rotten Tomatoes trash. I think there was enough fruit on the vine that
Agreed.
there's potential. But that's also because we like this type of genre of movie.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to quickly talk about briefly, because it's a Geekly podcast and Nick talks games with me more than Keith will, so I thought I'd take the opportunity to discuss it. And you're going under the knife soon, so you have a little recovery time. I want to talk about two games I
Mm-hmm.
played recently and pitch for them. So first is Assassin's Creed Mirage, which is the newest entry in the long-standing Assassin's Creed genre of open world narrative adventures. And this was originally conceived as a DLC, standalone DLC for the last
Mm-hmm.
adventure, which was Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which Nick was a big fan of, dumped a bunch of time into. I kind of
Yes.
cheesed my way through briefly because I was burnt out on the previous entry, Assassin's Creed Odyssey
Mm-hmm.
and Mirage, or Origins. Anyway, Mirage is
Origins,
more
yeah.
of a return. So at one point they bifurcated the series. It used to be a very stealth-based, assassin-based kind of adventure game, and then it went into a more open-world RPG. Some people loved, some people didn't love. I was a fan. I liked all of the varieties. This goes back to sort of the original gameplay design of it's much smaller. It follows this character Basim. You never get a bow and arrow. You don't get you do get a sword and a dagger, but you're doing a lot of sneaky sneak, standing in crowds to blend in, following people, jumping off a rooftop, stab him in the neck, move on to the next thing. This character is basically Aladdin. He's a street rat thief who gets chased out, and then he's got to go kill some baddies. It's really all the narrative gives you so far. I'd say I'm probably about a third in.
So, have you finished Valhalla?
No. I read up on some of its stuff, but when I bounce on a game, I bounce. I can't really go back.
Okay. Because the character Basim
Mhm.
is he's heavily in the game, and then he features heavily into the outside of the game. The current
Mhm.
world plot, which I'm curious if Mirage is going to get into that at all. I kind of would hope they don't, because it's
Yeah,
getting
from
out there.
some of
But
the stuff I had read, there's kind of a mic drop moment at the end of Valhalla that he plays into that
yeah,
this doesn't seem to be hinting towards. He seems like a pretty his rise from like nobody to badass is pretty fast in this game because they want to just get you into the assassinating. It
right.
very much feels like narratively it's not doing anything even remotely interesting, but
I don't think it's trying to, right?
yeah, that's the whole thing. Like, I don't understand that critique. It just wants to be like 15 hours of your time. I think that's all it's going to
Mm-hmm.
ask, and I'm digging it because of that. Like, I'm not invested. I like the sneaking around. I'm a stealth kind of guy, so I like the sneaking around. I like leveling up my little blow darts so I can blow dart some people from the shadows. I mean, I will say this: I miss bow and arrow because I am like a perch up on the rooftop and pick people off the bow and arrow. But this gives you other options. You got to get in a little bit closer. You get the one assassination button kills. So it's totally fine, totally worth a couple of days on your sick leave for sure.
My one question about the game is, and I've just read the reviews, and I haven't found anyone discuss this in the reviews, and I think that's probably because it was really speaking to people who've played the original games more.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm strictly an Odyssey and Valhalla player.
Mm-hmm.
Do the character controls, do they move the same still? Like, I know you're not doing melee combat and things like that, but
You are a little bit. The controls are almost exactly the same. They retained
okay.
all of the like mechanical upgrades from the new games. The scale's just a little smaller, and you have some different doodads. Combat, oh, hopefully you don't get into too many huge combat encounters because you're doing
Right.
all you can to avoid that here. But it's a little bit annoying. There's like one of those systems they do in all these open world games where it's like if you do enough things, people see you do enough of the kills or see you pickpocketing, you get like a bounty level and then more people chase you. But I don't love that kind of thing.
Your Grand Theft Auto cop meter.
Yeah, but it's not it's not invasive.
Right.
It's a totally just like passable entry until the next big thing comes out in a year or two, or the next Far Cry or whatever Ubisoft is working on. So I'm I like it. It's totally fine. But that said, I've talked a ton on this channel. Nick, I know you're a member. Xbox Game Pass is the thing. You pay your subscription fee, you get a ton of games. Half you probably won't even play. You can play for 10 minutes and then delete it. You don't need it. But day and date, new games come out.
Mm-hmm.
Starfield was a Game Pass drop. All kinds of cool stuff. And we're about to hit this deluge of games. The new Super Mario Brothers is coming out. Super Mario Wonder, which is going to be awesome. The Spider-Man 2 is coming out for PlayStation in a week or two. What's the other big one that's coming? I can't remember. Oh, man.
Yeah, Spider-Man 2, I know, and that's the big one.
No, there's another one like on that day. So we got Mario, Spider-Man, and one other thing. But regardless, it's just been an incredible year for games. It's incredible. It's almost overwhelming. So what can slip through the cracks are little indie games, right? Like this game Cocoon that just came out by a developer, released by Annapurna Interactive, which is like one of my favorite publishers, and it's developed by this place called Geometric Interactive. This game is a 6-hour game. I beat it in about 6 hours. It is a puzzle game.
Okay.
But also you move around. It's almost impossible to describe. But you move around and you have one interact button. And it's a puzzle game that basically the basic conceit is you have to get these little spheres, right? And you want to like use these little spheres because they power stuff up for you. They either power the thing that gets you over there, or you put it in here to open this door. General conceit we've played a million times. But interestingly, each little sphere that powers things are levels themselves. So you can jump into and out of each little sphere into a level you've played already and completed and now own it. And once you own it, it unlocks a superpower. So when you're carrying it, you can do a certain superpower in the world to do some like a Metroid. You need this thing to do that thing. So you may be carrying this thing and realize, oh, I need the other one from the first world that lets me jump high. How am I going to get it over here if I'm carrying this thing? Well, you can get it, jump into this thing, house it inside this thing, bring it over to that thing, and use it for that thing. Now, I know that didn't make a lot of sense, but once you start to understand that it's like Portal, once you grok it, it makes sense and it helps unlock a whole bunch of different puzzle types. But the thing about this game that the puzzles are interesting, and I never got stuck for more than like 5 minutes. But it makes you feel brilliant, but it's not like bang your head against the wall hard, and you can finish it in 6 hours. But the thing that is just brilliant about it, there's no dialogue, there's no interaction. It's like that game Journey. Ever played Journey on PlayStation?
Yes.
The design language is such that these complex puzzle mechanics that I can't even explain to you on this podcast, it seamlessly explains to you by doing, like Mario 1-1 world,
right,
in an instant, without a stitch of text, without a stitch of dialogue. You figure it out because the world, it brings you to where you need to do. It teaches what you need to do. It doesn't hold your hand, but at the same time, it respects you as a player and your intelligence. And the design language of the world is this, you're this like little bug guy in this like alien world, and the technology there is completely alien to you, but makes sense within the realm of the world. The sound design is beautiful. Art design is beautiful. This is like a 6-hour little no dialogue adventure game on Game Pass. You already own it if you have Game Pass. Might be my favorite game I played this year.
That's a tall.
Loved it. So while I say before you play Assassin's Creed, load it up. Before you load up Starfield, whatever you've got on your playlist for when you're down and out from your surgery, start with Cocoon. I think you're going to love it. It's my sleeper hit of the year. I don't know I haven't read any reviews. I don't know if anybody's covering it. I just saw it, and a podcast I listened to had mentioned the game, and I loaded up. Man, I played it through. Poof. I think in a sitting or two you'll play it.
So here's the dilemma. based on that recommendation. And maybe your Geekly followers can help with this scenario, because we're looking at a situation where I'm definitely on the shelf for 1 week up to 2 weeks, right? So the first week, not a whole lot of movement. We're going to be setting up the living room area to be kind of like mainly my living space, essentially, right? That's where we have the Switch hooked up.
Mm-hmm.
The Xbox and the PlayStation is in the playroom upstairs, fully hooked up there. I mean, do we move an entire game system down temporarily? I have to move it back? Do I commit just to Super Mario Wonder that first week? Which I don't know that by myself I can play that much Mario. I don't know that anyone can. Or do I have to venture upstairs, which is not going to be really possible the first week. The playroom's not going to be really accessible.
Well, this is the big thing, really. The question becomes, did you play and like and love, I can't remember. I think this is one of the things that disappointed me greatly. You weren't a huge fan of Spider-Man and Miles Morales, right?
I was not.
Oh,
No.
man, you might be the one guy. Okay, well, it actually helps things, because that's like my next big thing. I would say...
I want to be into it. I want to be. I wasn't, though.
Well, I would say don't jump in with the sequel. You got to replay the first ones. At least, did you play Miles Morales? It's much more. It's smaller and more.
I actually did play. I got at least halfway through the campaign on Miles Morales, whereas on the original Spider-Man game, I bailed in like the first 3 hours of the game.
All right, then what I would probably do if I'm you is I would sleep on Spider-Man for now. I would keep the Switch down there, and I would, because like you said, you're not going to play that much Mario. I'd keep the Switch handheld next to me. I'd have somebody bring the Xbox down, because then you've got Cocoon and you've got Mirage, which you can play on Xbox, which I think Mirage is going to be your kind of jam, because you know the lore, and it's real slow-paced in the beginning, so you can really ramp up your skills, and I think, but you ramp up faster than you do on like you're not, a 70-hour campaign or whatever. And then if, like you get past that and you want to jump into Starfield, because I think you're going to love Starfield, especially if you just have time, which is what Starfield
Okay, so give me the 1 minute Starfield pitch, because I got it. I haven't. It's downloaded. Mm-hmm. It's ready to play. But just from reading the reviews and everything, I haven't been able to.
Well, people wanted it to change the world, and it's just not that. It's a choose your own adventure novel. It has a main quest line, right? That's pretty interesting, right? You're a traveler in space, seeking out these artifacts because they do stuff, right? You want to know more about it. But also, it's got little short stories, hundreds upon thousands of them. Well, not hundred. The planet travel stuff is cool because you can travel to a random planet and like go into a factory, and you should watch our Geekly review of it. I did a whole 45-minute spiel on it.
Okay. When was that? I guess I missed that episode.
Would have been like a month ago, but just go back in the feed.
Yeah.
But anyway, the main storage is pretty interesting, but the main like pick and choose stuff, like I'll give you the one I used on the show already. You go into the bowels of this factory and you start reading all these little doodads that are just like, oh, my mom won't give me my inheritance until I go visit her, so I'm going. And then all these machines were like altered and you blah, 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 blah. You get to the end of it and you realize that the mom was actually like this Batman character, this Bruce Wayne, who had set up all these traps called the Mantis. And you learn about the Mantis as you're going down. And then when you beat all the baddies, if you beat all the baddies, or you can just hack the computer, there's like 17 ways to solve any certain thing. You get access to the Mantis cave, and then you get the Mantis suit and the Mantis ship. You can get in the ship and fly off, and now you use the Mantis ship. And there's little stories like that scattered everywhere. And so I'm enjoying it instead of just like playing the main thing and just trying to level up my skills and everything, because nothing's too difficult or whatnot. You can fly the ship, you can not fly the ship. You can go over here, you can fast travel, you can go through space if you want. You don't have to go through space. They give you complete choice amongst all the stuff. I just go in and spend like 45 minutes doing some stuff. Or like tracking a quest line and then being done with it, right? It works like that for me, like reading like a novella each little time and piecing it together. Because I play that game I don't need to finish it now. It doesn't feel like I need to finish this game right now. The compelling mystery isn't that compelling. So that's how I'm playing it.
Okay.
as like a side game. Whereas Mirage, I want to finish. Like I'm gonna go and finish. Then it'll probably be 15 hours. But Cocoon, I got in 2 sittings, which I loved, and it's like feels like I did a thing. So
Like a faster game.
yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway,
what's the take on Diablo Season 2?
I haven't done a lot of reading on it yet because that's going to be something I'm not going to be able to play until I get back from the cruise. My next thing I've been playing a little bit of is I've been going back to some point and click adventures. There's this game that's years old, but it's called Thimbleweed Park. It's by the guy who did Day of the Tentacle and Maniac Mansion back in the 90s. And so I've been playing that because I'm going to be able to take it with me on the cruise ship. So
Gotcha.
And sports. Red October here, and football's happening. So there's a lot of stuff happening on the channel. Nick, we'll have you back after your surgery to talk about what you've been playing and what you've been watching, because I'm sure you're going to be like just consuming content for the next.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot just with Ahsoka alone. There's a ton of Star Wars to talk about.
I haven't even started that. Yeah.
Loki, obviously, first episode's out. I'm holding off on that because that'll give me, I think, 4 episodes if I wait, which is exciting. I might try to get back into Succession because I'm only about a season, like half of the season.
Oh, you got to
finish
it up. You got to finish it up. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I wanted to jump back for 1 second. That movie title we couldn't come up with. It was The Last Exorcism. It's called 2010. And just real quick, the summary of the movie. After years of fooling the faithful, cleric Cotton Marcus feels remorse and decides to expose his chicanery through filming a documentary. With a crew in tow, Marcus arrives at the Louisiana farm of devout Louis Sweetser, who believes his daughter Nell is possessed. His usual stunts fail and realizes he's face to face with real evil and must summon true faith to protect Nell from demonic power. And like I had mentioned, the trailer really kind of lays in on the father, kind of like leaning towards we're going to have to kill her if we can't get the demon out. So, and it actually had a 72% on Rotten Tomatoes.
All
so
right.
That's a pretty good number for a horror flick. Produced on a $1.8 million budget, and it brought in $70 million.
There you go. That's how you make money.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
All right, friends. Well, Nick, we wish you the best with your surgery. We'll definitely check back in. Until we all meet again, keep on doing the things you find fun. Don't let anybody yuck your yum. And keep on geeking on. We'll see you next time. Peace.